Terrence Jackson was 38 years old when his dead wife walked into his bank on a Wednesday afternoon. For 3 years, he'd mourned Lydia, attended her funeral, cried over her empty casket. Every month without fail, he sent her mother Beverly $400 to help with medical bills and living expenses. It was a promise he'd made at the funeral, standing over the urn that supposedly held his wife's ashes. That Wednesday, Terrence went to his bank to fix a small account error. While waiting in line, he saw a woman at the teller window 50 feet away. Same walk, same laugh, same face. Lydia was alive, dressed in expensive clothes he'd never seen, withdrawing cash with casual confidence. When their eyes met, she didn't smile. She didn't explain. She ran. And in that moment, watching his dead wife speed away in a white BMW he'd never seen before, Terrence realized everything about the last 3 years had been a lie. What he discovered next would destroy everyone who'd betrayed him. But standing in that parking lot, he had no idea how deep the conspiracy went. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Terrence Jackson sat in his dimly lit home office, staring at his computer screen. The banking website displayed his account balance, a familiar Tuesday evening ritual. His cursor hovered over the Transfer Funds button as he prepared to send the monthly $400 to Beverly's account, just as he had done for the past 38 months since Lydia's death. The office still held traces of Lydia everywhere. Her framed degree hung on the wall. Her collection of small ceramic birds lined the bookshelf, and her favorite throw blanket draped over the spare chair. Terrence reached up to touch his wedding ring, a habit he'd developed whenever thoughts of her surfaced. From down the hall, he could hear Darius watching TV in the living room. His nephew's presence over the past few months had brought life back into the house, filling the empty spaces with the sounds of another person living, breathing, existing. The smell of the chicken stir-fry Darius had made for dinner still lingered in the air. Terrence entered the payment details mechanically, muscle memory taking over. Beverly's account information was saved in his favorites, making it a simple 2-click process. As he confirmed the transfer, his mind wandered to their last phone conversation 3 days ago. "The weather's been awful here in Colombia," Beverly had said, her voice carrying that familiar fragile quality. "Reminds me of that storm last month when Lydia and I—" She'd caught herself, quickly changing the subject to her supposed doctor's appointments. Terrence's fingers paused over the keyboard. Something about that slip nagged at him, just like Beverly's unusually specific questions about his work schedule. "Are they still having you work those late Thursday shifts?" she'd asked. "It must be hard managing your finances with those hospital hours." He shook his head, trying to clear away the doubt. Grief played tricks on the mind. He'd learned that the hard way. Some days he still thought he caught glimpses of Lydia in crowds, or heard her laugh in busy restaurants. His therapist called it normal, part of the process. Opening his recent bank statements, Terrence noticed small discrepancies he couldn't explain. A $23.50 charge at a coffee shop he'd never visited. A $47.82 purchase at a boutique he didn't recognize. They were minor amounts, easily overlooked in his comfortable salary, but something felt off. "Hey, Uncle T," Darius called from the living room. "You want to watch this documentary about deep-sea creatures? It's wild." "Maybe later," Terrence replied, his eyes still fixed on the statement. "Just finishing up some banking stuff." He pulled up statements from the previous months, scanning for patterns. More small charges appeared. A nail salon, a smoothie bar, a boutique fitness studio, all in Charlotte, all places he'd never been. Each charge was small enough to fly under the radar, but they added up. Kwame had been telling him for months that he needed to pay more attention to his finances, to start thinking about his future again. "You can't live in pause forever, T," his friend had said during their last lunch. Lydia wouldn't want that. Terrence reached for his phone, considering calling Kwame about the charges, then stopped himself. It was probably nothing, just some banking error or maybe even someone using a similar card number by mistake. These things happened. Still, he made a note in his phone to visit the bank during his lunch break tomorrow. He could have called customer service, but something made him want to handle this in person. Maybe it was time he started taking more active control of his life again, even in small ways. "I'm heading to bed." Darius appeared in the doorway, yawning. "You good?" Terrence nodded, managing a smile. "Yeah, just need to wrap this up. I'll be stopping by the bank tomorrow during lunch to sort out some charges. Want me to come with?" "I'm off tomorrow." "No need," Terrence said, shutting down his computer. "It shouldn't take long. I'll be back by 1. As Darius headed to his room, Terrence stood and stretched, his joints cracking from sitting too long. Tomorrow he'd get answers about these charges, clear up the discrepancy, and everything would make sense again. It was probably nothing, just like those times he thought he saw Lydia in crowds, or Beverly's odd slips during their phone calls, or the way his wedding ring sometimes felt heavier than it used to. Just another Tuesday night? Another $400 transfer? Another step through the motions of his carefully maintained routine. He switched off his office light, leaving Lydia's ceramic birds to watch over the darkness until morning. The bank's air conditioning hit Terrence as he walked through the glass doors at exactly noon. The lobby was busy with the usual lunch rush, a mix of business people and retirees filling the rows of leather chairs. He pulled a number from the red dispenser, 84. The digital display above the teller windows showed 77. Terrence found an empty seat near a potted plant and pulled out his phone, opening his notes app where he'd documented the suspicious charges. $23.50 at the Daily Grind Coffee Bar, $47.82 at Boutique Bliss, $32 at Pure Bar Fitness. He'd mapped them all, a triangle of locations within 5 miles of his house, places he'd driven past but never entered. A child's laughter echoed through the lobby, making him glance up briefly before returning to his phone. He added another note about the timing of the charges, all during business hours, all on weekdays. Maybe someone had skimmed his card data. It happened more often than people realized, especially at gas stations. The digital display changed to 78. Terrence shifted in his chair, his dress shoes squeaking against the polished floor. The bank's familiar sounds washed over him, printers humming, phones ringing, the soft murmur of transactions and small talk. Then he heard it, a laugh, rich and warm, with that slight catch at the end, like music stopping one note too soon. His head snapped up. 50 feet away, at the furthest teller window, stood a woman in expensive gray athletic wear, her hair styled in a way he'd never seen it, but would know anywhere. She leaned casually against the counter, one hand resting on her hip. That same stance he'd watched 1,000 mornings as she'd made coffee, or gotten ready for work. Terrence's phone slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. The sound felt distant, underwater. His chest constricted. It was Lydia. She was alive. She was counting cash, smiling at the teller, perfectly at ease. Her athleisure outfit probably cost more than his suit. A designer bag hung from her shoulder. She looked healthy, happy, alive. Terrence couldn't move. His body felt bolted to the chair as his mind spiraled through impossible calculations. 3 years, funeral, cremation, grief counseling, support groups, wedding ring, monthly payments to Beverly, Beverly's phone calls, Beverly's questions, Beverly. The pieces started clicking together with devastating clarity, but before he could process them, Lydia turned. Her eyes swept the lobby casually, then locked onto him. He watched the color drain from her face, watched recognition and fear flash across features he'd memorized years ago. Her hand jerked, sending bills scattering across the counter. She grabbed at them frantically, stuffing them into her bag. Terrence finally stood, his legs shaking. "Lydia!" His voice came out as a whisper. She ran. The spell broke. Terence bolted after her, bumping into other customers, ignoring their protests. His dress shoes slipped on the polished floor as he pushed through the heavy glass doors into the bright afternoon sun. "Lydia!" he shouted, louder now. "Lydia!" She was 20 yards ahead, sprinting across the parking lot. The automatic locks on a white BMW clicked. She yanked the door open and threw herself inside. Terence ran harder, his tie whipping over his shoulder. "Stop! Please!" The BMW's engine roared to life. He reached the car just as it jerked backward out of the space. His palm slapped against the window. Through the tinted glass, he caught one last glimpse of her face, wide-eyed, terrified, not of him, of being caught. The car peeled out of the parking lot, tires squealing. Terence stood there, bent over, hands on his knees, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Around him, bank customers stared. Someone asked if he was okay. His trembling fingers found his phone, scrolled to Kwame's number. It rang twice. "T, aren't you at work?" "She's alive." Terence's voice shook. "Kwame, she's alive. I just saw her. Lydia's alive." Silence on the line. Then, "Where are you?" "First Charlotte Bank on Providence." "She was here. She ran. White BMW, new model. I didn't get the plate." "Don't move. I'm 10 minutes away. Do not leave that parking lot." Terence ended the call and walked numbly to his car. He sat in the driver's seat, air conditioning blasting, staring at nothing. After a moment, he called his office. "This is Terence Jackson. I'm not feeling well. Taking the rest of the day." His voice sounded strange to his own ears, distant, mechanical. The drive home passed in a blur. He had no memory of traffic lights or turns, just found himself parking in his driveway. The house looked different somehow. Everything looked different. Inside, he heard Darius's video game sound effects from the living room. "Uncle T, that was quick." "Did you sort out the bank stuff?" Terence walked past without answering, went straight to his office, and locked the door. He sank into his chair, staring at Lydia's ceramic birds on the shelf. 3 years of grief, 3 years of mourning, 3 years of sending money to Beverly. His wife was alive, and she had run from him. Terence's hands trembled as he logged into his banking portal. Each click of the keyboard felt loud in his quiet office, like gunshots in the silence. The familiar interface loaded, the same one he'd used countless times to send money to Beverly. Now every pixel held potential betrayal. He navigated to his transaction history and filtered for the monthly $400 transfers. There they were, neat rows stretching back 3 years and 2 months. 38 payments, each one a knife in his back. He clicked the most recent transfer and found himself staring at details he'd never bothered to examine before. The receiving account had Beverly's name, but something caught his eye. A note about multiple users. He dug deeper, following the digital trail. His IT background kicked in, pushing through the emotional fog. 2 authorized users on the account. 2. "No," he whispered, scrolling through the transaction details. The withdrawals painted a map he knew too well. The daily grind on Providence Road. Pure Bar in Myers Park. Boutique Bliss at Phillips Place. All within minutes of his house. None anywhere near Columbia, where Beverly supposedly lived. His phone buzzed. Kwame was here. Terence walked to the front door in a daze, past Darius, who had paused his game and was watching him with concern. Kwame stood on the porch, already in investigator mode. His usual easy smile was replaced by focused intensity. "Talk to me," he said, following Terence to the office. Terence pulled up the banking records again. "Look at this, the account I've been sending money to. Beverly's account. It's being accessed all over Charlotte." His voice cracked. "High-end places, salons, boutiques, restaurants I drive past every day." Kwame leaned over his shoulder, studying the screen. "You're sure it was her at the bank?" I'd know her anywhere. Terence rubbed his wedding ring unconsciously. She saw me and ran, like a ghost turning solid and running away. The BMW, Kwame said, pulling out his phone. I've got a contact at DMV who owes me. Let me run the plate search. He stepped into the hallway to make the call. Terence kept digging through transactions. A pattern emerged in the withdrawals. They happened within days of his deposits, like clockwork. Someone was waiting for his money. Someone in Charlotte. Someone who was supposed to be dead. I can't tell Beverly I know, he said, when Kwame returned. Not yet. She'll warn Lydia. Agreed. Kwame sat down heavily. We need to understand what we're dealing with first. How deep this goes. His phone rang 20 minutes later. The call lasted less than a minute, but Kwame's expression said everything. The BMW is registered to Lydia Monroe, he said quietly. Her maiden name. Address is at the Madison Apartments on East Boulevard. Terence knew the place. Luxury units with private garages, gated access, a rooftop pool. He drove past it weekly. 15 minutes from his house. 3 years of grief, and she'd been 15 minutes away. That night, they parked Kwame's unmarked car across from the Madison. Terence's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every blonde woman made his heart stop until he realized it wasn't her. They watched until midnight. Nothing. The next evening, they returned. At 7:45 p.m., a white BMW pulled into the garage. At 8:30, Lydia emerged from the building's front entrance carrying shopping bags from stores he recognized from the bank statements. She looked exactly as she had at the bank. Confident, well-dressed, alive. A man appeared from the parking area. Younger than Terence, maybe early 30s, athletic build in expensive casual wear. He approached Lydia with the ease of familiarity. She smiled, that same smile that used to greet Terence every morning, and kissed him. Not a quick peck, but the comfortable kiss of an established couple. Terence's stomach rolled. His hands gripped the dashboard so hard his knuckles went white. 3 years of grieving while she built a new life. 3 years of sending money that helped pay for her shopping trips and dates. Kwame's hand landed firmly on his shoulder. We document everything, he said, his voice steady and certain. Every detail, every transaction, every meeting. We build the case until it's bulletproof. Through the windshield, Lydia and her companion disappeared into the building, her laughter carrying across the street. That same laugh from the bank, from their marriage, from a life he now realized had been a lie. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Terence sat in his hospital office early Thursday morning. His hands moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, but his mind raced with questions. He'd called in sick yesterday after the bank, but today he needed his work computer, and more importantly, his IT system access. The cursor blinked on the public records database search page. He typed Lydia Monroe and hit enter. His breath caught as results populated the screen. There it was, clear as day. A legal name change filing from 2 years ago. Lydia Jackson formally becoming Lydia Monroe again. 2 years, he whispered, scrolling through the document. She waited barely a year after dying before erasing our marriage completely. The timestamp on the filing showed it was done on a Tuesday morning, probably while he'd been at work, still wearing his wedding ring, still keeping her clothes in their closet. His fingers tightened on the mouse. He opened another tab and typed an email to his insurance company, requesting copies of all documentation related to Lydia's death claim. Then he contacted the county records office for the death certificate. Both would take time to process, but he needed the paper trail. His phone buzzed. Kwame. Found your boy, Kwame said, without preamble. Troy Simmons, 32. Personal trainer at Elite Fitness on Providence. His Instagram is public. Man loves posting workout videos and vacation pics. Terence pulled up the profile. Troy's feed was full of carefully curated photos, gym selfies, motivational quotes, and there, scattered throughout, pictures with Lydia. Her hair lighter now, but her smile unchanged. Beach photos, concert videos, cozy restaurant dinners. How long? Terrence managed to ask. First photo together was 2 years ago at some rooftop bar downtown. They weren't hiding. Lots of comments from friends, tagged locations. She's been living completely in the open, man. Because she never thought he'd look. Why would he? She was dead. The death certificate arrived in his email while they talked. Terrence opened it, scanning the details he'd been too grief-stricken to question 3 years ago. Cause of death: cardiac arrest. Location: Miami-Dade County. Certifying physician: Dr. Raymond Okafor. "Let me call you back," he told Kwame. His first call was to the Miami-Dade medical examiner's office. The clerk was helpful, but confused. No record of any Lydia Jackson's death in their system for that time period. No record of Dr. Okafor working with their office. Next, he searched for Dr. Okafor's practice. The number was disconnected. A deeper search revealed why. The Florida Medical Board had suspended his license 18 months ago. The reason? Multiple instances of falsifying medical documentation. "It was all planned," Terrence said to his empty office. "They found a corrupt doctor, arranged the paperwork, set everything up beforehand." He thought about Beverly's insistence on immediate cremation, about the final wishes letter that had guided his decisions about the insurance money, about 3 years of monthly payments splitting between mother and daughter, while he grieved a death that never happened. At 6 that evening, Kwame arrived at his house with a stack of printed photos from social media and a grim expression. They spread everything across Terrence's dining room table. Bank statements, the death certificate, Troy's Instagram posts, the name change documents. "They're not even trying to hide," Kwame said, gesturing to a photo of Lydia and Troy at a Panthers game from last season. "She's just living her life, spending your money, betting you'd never recover enough to notice." Terrence picked up one of the bank statements, studying the withdrawal patterns. "We need to keep the money flowing," he said quietly. "The monthly payments. I need to keep sending them." Kwame nodded. "Don't tip them off. We document everything from here out. I've got surveillance equipment we can use to track the withdrawals. I'll install monitoring software on my accounts," Terrence added. "Every transaction, every location. Build the evidence." He walked to his office, Kwame following. The wedding photo still sat on his desk, Lydia in white, both of them laughing, his hand holding hers with the ring he still wore. That ring suddenly felt like it was burning his finger. Slowly, deliberately, Terrence twisted the gold band off his left hand. 3 years of loyalty to a lie. 3 years of grieving someone who had been laughing at him from 15 minutes away. He opened his desk drawer, placed the ring inside, and turned the key. A cool breeze drifted through the kitchen window as Terrence sat surrounded by stacks of papers at his dining table. Bank statements, insurance documents, and printouts created a maze of evidence around his laptop. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished wood surface, highlighting coffee rings and scribbled notes. Darius approached with 2 steaming mugs. "Made it strong, just how you like it," he said, setting one beside his uncle. The young man's eyes scanned the papers spread across the table. "Man, this is like one of those detective show evidence boards, but on a table." "Thanks," Terrence replied, taking a sip. He pulled up the life insurance documentation on his laptop. "I need to understand exactly how much they stole." The insurance payout details were stark on the screen. $175,000 paid out 3 years ago after Lydia's death. Terrence remembered receiving the check, remembered following the instructions in what he thought were Lydia's final wishes, a letter he now knew was part of the fraud. "Look at this," he said, pointing to his notes as Darius leaned over his shoulder. "I gave Beverly $50,000 for her care. Put $75,000 in a trust for future children we never had time to have. With Beverly as trustee, of course. Kept $50,000 for myself." Darius whistled low. They planned it all out, even made sure to get control of most of the money. Terrence nodded, pulling up the trust account records. Empty, he said flatly. Beverly liquidated it within 6 months. Claimed there were administrative costs, medical emergencies. I never questioned it. I was too... He trailed off, rubbing his temples. Too devastated, Darius finished quietly. Yeah. Terrence grabbed a calculator. So that's $125,000 from the insurance scam. Plus 38 months of $400 payments, $1,200. His fingers moved across the keypad. Total theft, $140,200. He spread out the bank statements chronologically, creating a timeline of withdrawals from Beverly's account. Each month showed the same pattern. Terrence's $400 deposit, followed within days by a withdrawal in Charlotte. Lydia's work. Some months also showed smaller withdrawals in Columbia. Beverly taking her cut. Mother and daughter splitting the money, Terrence said, marking the pattern with a highlighter. Beverly probably gets 25% for playing her part. Lydia takes the rest. Darius paced behind him, fists clenched. Uncle T, we need to confront them. Right now. I'll drive to Columbia myself and... No. Terrence's voice was firm. They thought I was too weak to fight back. Too broken to ever figure it out. We proved them wrong, the right way. But, the right way, Terrence repeated, standing to stretch his stiff muscles. I have a meeting with a lawyer in an hour. Everything has to be done properly. Later that morning, Terrence sat in a plush leather chair across from Patricia Chen, a fraud specialist attorney. Her office overlooked downtown Charlotte, but Terrence barely noticed the view as he laid out his evidence. Insurance fraud, Chen said, examining the documents. Filing false death certificates. Conspiracy to commit fraud. These are federal crimes, Mr. Jackson. She looked up from the papers. And the amounts involved make it significant. What are my options? Terrence asked. You can pursue both criminal charges and civil recovery, she explained, making notes. The criminal case would be handled by federal prosecutors. Prison time is likely given the scope and premeditation. Civilly, we can sue for full restitution plus damages. She spread the documents across her desk methodically. But my advice? Gather everything before making any move. Bank records, surveillance, witness statements. Build an airtight case. Once we act, they'll try to hide assets, destroy evidence. We only get one shot at this. Terrence nodded, watching as she sorted his evidence into categories. Each piece of paper represented another thread in the web of lies that had trapped him for 3 years. But now he was the one weaving a net. One that would ensure justice. How long to prepare everything? He asked. Chen considered. Give me 2 weeks to review and organize. We'll need statements from the bank employees who can verify seeing your wife. Documentation from Miami about the false death certificate. Full financial forensics. Then we can discuss the best approach for maximum impact. Dawn painted Charlotte's skyline in shades of purple and orange as Terrence slid into the passenger seat of Kwame's dark SUV. Steam rose from 2 large coffee cups in the console between them. The vehicle was parked with a clear view of the entrance to Lydia's luxury apartment complex. You sure you're ready for this? Kwame asked, adjusting his camera's zoom lens. Terrence took a long sip of coffee. Been ready for 3 years. Just didn't know it. They settled into what would become their morning routine for the next week. Kwame's investigative experience proved invaluable. He knew how to remain inconspicuous while gathering evidence, how to photograph without drawing attention, when to move positions to avoid security patrols. At 7:15 a.m., right on schedule, Lydia emerged from the building's glass doors. She wore designer workout clothes, carrying a leather bag that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Terrence's money had funded that bag. Those clothes, this lifestyle, built on lies. Getting it all? Terrence asked, as Kwame's camera clicked rapidly. Every step, Kwame confirmed. Time-stamped, geotagged, The works. They followed at a safe distance as Lydia drove her BMW to an upscale wellness spa in South Park. The sign read, "Lotus and Moon Wellness Experience," in elegant script. Through the large windows, they watched her greet co-workers, set up her station, prepare for clients. Part-time schedule, Kwame noted, checking his notes from previous days. Works Tuesday through Thursday, 8 to 2. Plenty of time to spend your money the rest of the week. They documented her routine over several days. Long lunches at expensive restaurants, shopping trips to boutiques, afternoon workouts at Troy's gym. She moved through the world with the ease of someone who had no financial concerns, because she didn't. She had Terrence's insurance money and monthly payments funding her comfortable life. Through the gym's windows, they photographed her interactions with Troy. The personal trainer was clearly besotted, bringing her smoothies, stealing kisses between clients. Social media posts Kwame found showed them together at concerts, wine tasting, weekend trips to the mountains. In every caption, she was Lydia Monroe, divorced, starting fresh, living her best life. "He has no idea," Terrence said, watching Troy wrap his arms around the woman he thought he knew. "She's got him completely fooled." They collected discarded receipts from public trash cans, evidence of purchases made with Terrence's money. High-end makeup stores, spa treatments, designer clothes. Each receipt was carefully bagged and labeled as evidence. On Thursday evening, a familiar car pulled into the complex's parking garage. Beverly's silver Camry with South Carolina plates. "Right on time," Kwame muttered, camera ready. Minutes later, Beverly emerged onto the sidewalk where Lydia waited. Mother and daughter embraced, laughing together like they hadn't orchestrated a devastating fraud. Beverly carried an overnight bag, clearly planning to stay, probably to coordinate their ongoing deception. Terrence's hands gripped his knees as he watched them. The rage he felt wasn't hot or explosive. It was ice-cold, crystalline, clarifying. These women had stolen 3 years of his life, had watched him grieve while building this elaborate fiction. His dead wife and her mother, standing there laughing about their successful con. "We've got enough," Kwame said quietly. "Photos, videos, receipts, bank records, witness statements from the bank. We can move whenever you're ready." Terrence shook his head, eyes still fixed on the women as they disappeared into the building. "Not yet. I want them all together. Beverly, Lydia, Troy. No escape routes, no time to coordinate stories. I want to see their faces when it all falls apart." That night, after hours of surveillance, Terrence sat in his home office and composed a text to Beverly. He chose his words carefully, maintaining the role of grieving son-in-law she expected him to play. "Hi, Beverly. I'm going to be in Columbia next weekend for a work conference. Would love to take you to dinner Saturday. I have something important to discuss about Lydia's memory." He hit send, then waited. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Beverly typing, probably already planning how to warn Lydia, how to maintain their facade for just a little longer. They had no idea their facade was already crumbling, that every move they made now was being documented, that their carefully constructed lies were about to collapse around them. Terrence's phone buzzed less than an hour after he sent the text to Beverly. His monitoring software captured her response instantly. "Of course, sweetheart. What did you want to discuss about Lydia?" "I'm always here to talk about her." The eagerness in her reply made his stomach turn. 3 years of practiced sympathy, of calculated concern, all while knowing Lydia was alive and well, spending his money just minutes from his house. He crafted his response carefully. "Just something I want to do to honor her." "I'll explain in person," Beverly replied with a string of heart emojis, another performance for the grieving son-in-law she'd helped deceive. Terrence watched his monitoring dashboard light up within minutes. Beverly's phone made 5 calls to a Charlotte number. The burner phone Kwame had identified as Lydia's backup line. None of the calls connected. "They're scrambling," Kwame said over speakerphone as they tracked the activity. Beverly's probably trying to warn her. An hour later, Lydia's BMW appeared on security footage at 3 different ATMs. She withdrew the daily maximum at each one, nearly $3,000 in cash. Emergency money. Running money. "Look at this," Terrence said to Darius, who stood behind his chair watching the monitoring screens. "They're panicking, but they don't even know what about yet." "Good," Darius growled. "Let them sweat." Throughout Friday, Terrence tracked their increasing desperation. Beverly made hotel reservations in Charlotte, instead of waiting in Columbia. Lydia canceled her spa appointments for the weekend. More cash withdrawals. Hurried phone calls between burner phones. "They think I'm coming to Columbia tomorrow," Terrence said during an evening strategy session with Kwame and Darius. "Instead, we're going to them." Friday night, they positioned themselves near Lydia's apartment complex. Beverly's silver Camry was already there, parked next to Lydia's BMW. Through the large windows of Lydia's third-floor apartment, they could see shadows moving, 3 distinct figures pacing, gesturing. "All the players in one place," Kwame noted, checking his watch. "Just like you wanted." Terrence opened the evidence folder on his laptop one final time. Everything was organized chronologically, backed up in triplicate, copies already with his lawyer. Bank statements showing 3 years of $400 payments and their unauthorized withdrawals. Surveillance photos of Lydia living openly in Charlotte. The fraudulent death certificate with the suspended doctor's signature. Insurance documents proving the $175,000 payout and its theft. Witness statements from bank employees who saw Lydia regularly. Beverly's financial records showing her part in the conspiracy. Social media posts proving the timeline of deception. "You sure you don't want us to come up with you?" Darius asked, as they watched another heated conversation play out in silhouette above. "No," Terrence said. "I need to face them alone. But if I'm not back in 30 minutes... "We call the police," Kwame finished. "We know the plan." They waited through Saturday, watching more panicked activity. Beverly and Lydia left briefly for supplies, both looking over their shoulders constantly. Troy arrived around noon, his gym bag slung over his shoulder, clearly planning to stay for what they thought would be Terrence's Columbia trip. At 7 p.m., Terrence stepped out of Kwame's SUV. The evening air was cool against his face as he walked toward the building's entrance. His heart beat steadily. His hands remained still. The rage that had driven him for weeks had crystallized into pure focus. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt endless. Each step down the carpeted hallway echoed with 3 years of lies, of false grief, of stolen time and money and trust. He stopped at apartment 312. Terrence took one deep breath, then knocked firmly on the door. Footsteps approached from inside. Light, familiar footsteps he'd known for years. The handle turned, the door opened. Lydia stood there in expensive loungewear, her face a mask of practiced concern that shattered into pure terror when she saw him. She tried to slam the door shut, but Terrence was already moving forward. Terrence's palm pressed against the door, preventing Lydia from slamming it shut. Her face had drained of all color, mouth opening and closing without sound. Behind her, he could see the modern apartment he'd watched from afar for weeks, all paid for with his stolen money. "We need to talk, Lydia. Or should I call the police and let them explain why you're not dead?" His voice was steady, controlled. Lydia's shoulders slumped in defeat. She stepped back, allowing him to enter. The apartment smelled of scented candles and expensive coffee. Beverly sat rigid on a gray sectional sofa, her defiant expression betraying no hint of the fragile, grieving mother she'd played for 3 years. Troy stood in the open-concept kitchen, athletic build tense as he looked between them all with growing confusion. Terrence chose an armchair facing all 3 of them and sat down calmly, placing his evidence folder on the coffee table. The room crackled with tension. "Who are you?" Troy asked, his brow furrowed. What's going on? I'm her husband, Terrence replied evenly, watching Troy's eyes widen. Did she tell you she's married? That her name isn't Lydia Monroe, it's Lydia Jackson? That she faked her death 3 years ago and her husband has been funding your lifestyle? Troy turned to Lydia, shock and disgust warring on his face. What is he talking about? Troy, I can explain. Lydia started, but Terrence cut her off. Let me explain, he said, opening his folder. 3 years ago, my wife Lydia told me she was going on a girls' trip to Miami. A few days later, her mother Beverly called to tell me Lydia had died of sudden cardiac arrest. He removed the fraudulent death certificate. This document, signed by a doctor who lost his license for falsifying records, made it official. Beverly insisted on immediate cremation before I could see the body. Troy sank into a bar stool, shaking his head in disbelief as Terrence continued methodically. The life insurance paid out $175,000. Following what I thought were Lydia's final wishes, I gave Beverly $50,000 for her care and put $75,000 in a trust for our future children, with Beverly as trustee. They emptied that trust within 6 months. He laid out bank statements showing the systematic theft. For 3 years, I've sent Beverly $400 every month to help with her supposed medical bills. That money went straight to Lydia's account here in Charlotte. He spread out ATM photos showing Lydia making withdrawals. They've stolen $142,200 in total while I grieved for a woman who was living 15 minutes away. You're insane, Troy said to Lydia. Both of you are insane. He grabbed his gym bag from the counter. Troy, please, Lydia pleaded, reaching for him. I was going to tell you everything. When? Troy demanded. After how many more lies? After how much more stolen money? He turned to Terrence. I had no idea. I thought she was divorced. This is sick. He headed for the door. I was trapped, Lydia called after him. I needed a fresh start. But Troy was already gone, the door slamming behind him. Lydia spun toward Terrence, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand. You were suffocating me. I couldn't breathe in that life anymore. I was going to pay you back eventually. We were going to tell you when the time was right, Beverly added, her voice carrying that familiar false sympathy that now made Terrence's skin crawl. The time was right 3 years ago, Terrence replied coldly. Before you let me bury an empty casket, before you stole my money, before you watched me grieve while building this fiction 15 minutes from my house. He stood, towering over them both. His voice remained steady, but carried the weight of steel. You have 48 hours to return every dollar, $140,200, or I go to the FBI and insurance fraud division with everything. You're looking at 10 to 20 years in federal prison. This is your only chance. Sunday morning light filtered through Terrence's kitchen windows as his phone buzzed for the 10th time. Lydia's name flashed on the screen again, followed immediately by Beverly's. He set the phone face down on his lawyer's desk, focusing instead on the stack of legal documents before him. They're getting desperate, his lawyer, Marcus Chen, observed, while organizing the evidence files. How many times have they called since yesterday? 23 times from Lydia, 15 from Beverly. Terrence signed another affidavit, plus about 50 text messages I haven't read. Marcus nodded, adding the signed document to a growing pile. And you're certain you want to proceed with full criminal charges? No settlement negotiations? They had their chance to settle. The 48 hours isn't up until tomorrow, but we both know they don't have the money. Terrence's voice was firm. They spent 3 years stealing from me. Let them spend a few years facing consequences. Monday afternoon brought the inevitable confrontation. Terrence was reviewing case files in his home office when Darius called from downstairs. Uncle T, they're here, both of them. Through his office window, Terrence saw Lydia's white BMW in his driveway. Beverly's older Camry parked behind it. He heard Darius answer the door, his nephew's voice carrying clearly. "He doesn't want to see either of you." "Please," Lydia begged. "We need to talk to him. We have some of the money." "Some isn't all," Darius replied. "And you're not coming inside." Terence descended the stairs slowly, each step measured. Through the open door, he saw Lydia in expensive yoga wear, Beverly beside her in a floral dress that screamed false innocence. Both women's faces showed the strain of sleepless nights. "Move aside, Darius," Terence said quietly. "I'll handle this." He stepped onto the front porch, closing the door behind him. The summer air was thick with humidity and tension. "We have 15,000, Beverly started immediately. "It's everything I could pull together. We can work out a payment plan for the rest." The deadline was clear. Terence cut her off. "All of it, or consequences." "We spent it," Lydia admitted, her voice cracking. "The insurance money, the trust, the monthly payments. It's gone. On rent, trips, living expenses. But Terence, please, we can fix this. I made a horrible mistake." She stepped toward him, eyes brimming with tears he now knew were as false as her death had been. "I still love you. We had something real once. Remember our wedding day? Remember how happy we were? We can have that again. I'll do anything to make this right." Terence studied her face, the face he'd loved, mourned, and now saw clearly for the first time. His voice was soft with pity rather than anger. "I don't know who you are. The woman I loved died 3 years ago. You're just a criminal wearing her face." He turned and walked back inside, Darius locking the door behind him. Through the window, he watched them stand there for several minutes, reality finally settling over them like a heavy shroud. They'd gambled everything on his weakness, on his grief, on his love. They'd lost. Tuesday morning arrived with clarity. Terence filed the police report first, providing Detective Sarah Martinez with his meticulously organized evidence. By noon, he'd spoken with the insurance company's fraud division, forwarding them copies of everything. Federal investigators contacted him within hours. The machinery of justice moved swiftly after that. Friday morning, Terence received a call from Detective Martinez. They'd arrested Lydia at her apartment while she was packing to flee. The judge set bail at $100,000, money she didn't have. By Friday afternoon, Beverly was in custody in Colombia, charged as an accessory to fraud and conspiracy. 3 months passed in a blur of legal proceedings. Terence sat in the federal courtroom, Darius and Kwame flanking him supportively. As Lydia entered her guilty plea, she'd traded a full confession for a slightly reduced sentence. Her designer clothes were replaced by prison orange, her confident posture crushed under the weight of consequence. "In the matter of federal insurance fraud and filing false death certificate," Judge Harrison intoned, "this court sentences you to 4 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years supervised release." Beverly's sentencing followed. 2 years incarceration plus 5 years probation. Both women were ordered to pay full restitution plus penalties, nearly $200,000 they would likely never be able to repay. As bailiffs led them away, neither woman looked back at Terence. Their performance was finally over. The truth had shattered their carefully constructed fiction, leaving nothing but ruins and restitution orders in its wake. The October sun slanted through empty windows as Terence stood in what used to be his living room. The space echoed with footsteps of movers carrying out the last boxes, their heavy boots scuffing against hardwood floors that had witnessed 3 years of his solitary grief. "That's the last of the furniture, Mr. Jackson," the head mover called from the doorway. "Just these 2 boxes left." Terence nodded, scanning the vacant room. The wall still showed faint rectangles where photos once hung, wedding pictures, family gatherings, moments from a life he'd thought was real. He'd taken them down months ago, storing some, discarding others. The ghost frames would be someone else's to paint over now. The closing went smoothly, his realtor, Sarah, mentioned, appearing with final paperwork. New owners take possession next week. They're excited. Young couple, first home. Good, Terrence said quietly. They can make their own memories here. His new condo waited across town. A modern two-bedroom in a secure building near the hospital where he worked. No floral wallpaper to remind him of Lydia's decorating phase. No garden she'd planted then abandoned. No creaking steps that had marked his lonely midnight wanderings. Just clean lines, fresh paint, and a view of the city that held no echoes of the past. Darius had already moved their essential items over, claiming the second bedroom as his own. His nephew's presence through everything had been an unexpected anchor, their bond strengthening as they helped each other navigate the aftermath of Lydia's betrayal. Where once they'd been merely uncle and nephew sharing space, they were now family in the truest sense. "Ready?" Darius asked from the doorway, car keys jingling in his hand. "Almost." Terrence picked up one of the remaining boxes, photo albums he still couldn't quite bring himself to throw away. His therapist, Dr. Warner, had encouraged him to take his time sorting through them. "You're not just processing betrayal," she'd explained in their last session. "You're grieving twice. Once for the woman you thought died, and now for the marriage you thought was real. That's harder in some ways, but it's honest grief this time." The insurance company's investigation had recovered $28,000 from Beverly's seized assets, a fraction of what was stolen, but Terrence had made peace with the financial loss. The emotional accounting mattered more, and that ledger was finally balancing toward healing. He'd started dating again, cautiously. Coffee meetings arranged through friends, nothing serious yet. But he found himself open to possibilities in a way that felt different from before. Clearer-eyed, more aware of both his worth and his boundaries. The weight of false loyalty had lifted. Friday evening found him at Kwame's house, surrounded by people who'd stood by him through everything. His friend had arranged what he called a new beginning dinner. Colleagues who'd covered his work during the worst days, family members who'd offered shoulders and spare rooms, friends who'd listened without judgment. The food was excellent, the conversation warm, but it was the simple presence of genuine relationships that struck Terrence most deeply. These people had seen him at his lowest and helped him rise, expecting nothing in return. Kwame clinked his glass for attention. "A toast," he announced, "to my brother Terrence, the strongest man I know." Terrence stood, uncomfortable with spotlight but knowing he needed to speak. "3 years ago," he began, his voice steady, "I thought my life was over. Turns out, it was just beginning. Thank you all for helping me find my way back." The next morning, a letter arrived with prison markings. Lydia's handwriting on the envelope, smaller than he remembered. Terrence didn't hesitate, didn't wonder about its contents or feel tempted by possible explanations. He dropped it straight into the shredder, unopened. Her words held no power over him anymore. That evening, he unlocked his desk drawer and removed the wedding ring he'd stored there months ago. The gold caught the light, and for a moment, he remembered not the betrayal, but the hopeful young man who'd worn it. Someone who believed in love and commitment without reservation. That man hadn't been wrong to believe, just deceived in where he placed his trust. The jeweler's shop was small, family-owned, warm with the glow of display cases. The elderly craftsman listened carefully to Terrence's request, handling the ring with understanding hands. "We can melt this down," he explained. "Forge something new. What did you have in mind?" "A signet ring," Terrence replied. "Simple design, but I want one word engraved on it. Resilient. Right hand?" the jeweler asked, measuring his finger. "Yes. New hand, new meaning. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.